Hello everyone, here we are again today and having our good, interesting host Ed from UK, and today he is presenting his first model of the series of the Ra University. Hi Ed.
Hello.
Hmm. So then, not much to say more than go ahead and tell us what you have to say today.
Hey, hello everyone. Right, I'm gonna put on my slideshow and we'll get started. Welcome to the first module of Ra University. Now I'm a little nervous, but let's hope it all comes together first. First time. This is the what I like to call the physics of the illusion. So what I've tried to do is I've kind of tried to bring together a kind of a unified cosmology to bring physics as we know it and scientific endeavor as we understand it together with what Ra says and how he describes the metaphysical aspect of reality. My name's Edward Gregory. This is for the Law of One Europe group. Um, Once again, I'd always like to say this is all just my opinion, and I'm of no uh, um, misconceptions that science may very well be wrong. That is how it works. That is what it does. It kind of progresses. So I hope that you take what resonates and you uh, leave the rest, as Quo likes to say. Anyway, so let's move forward. So first off, this brings us to what Ra says as the foundation of the metaphysics of our reality as we see it. Now, Ra describes it in a few different ways. He first off describes the infinite intelligence. Now, this is the source itself, the consciousness that pervades everything that that is the creator experiencing itself in every regard. So the way that it does that is it takes the intelligent or the infinite energy, and it essentially unifies that into harmonic distortions, as Ra talks about it, using will, love, and light as the tools to then create reality as we understand it, but then bring it all back together in a kind of big crunch to begin the next octave as we know it. So this is the kind of the basic foundation that Ra lays out for us, and really it is a very simple breakdown of forces and physics as we know it, but it's also got the potential to have all the complexity that we see in the universe. So um, first off, I'd like to kind of compare it to what we do actually know. So this idea of the infinite, the intelligent infinity expanding outwards by patterning infinite energy to understand and to know itself via what we perceive in reality, as in the quantum field, which then slowly pervades into matter and into galaxies and planets and us and everything else. So the standard model that we understand basically just talks about the Big Bang as the moment that we can start to perceive matter and space time start from. But what Ra gives us is a deeper understanding of that, the kind of the mechanics whereby reality itself comes into being, where the Big Bang essentially would have started from. Now, you can see in the bottom image, that is how science views what's happened now. What the standard model of physics. It goes from an expansion point where you get the different forces and different energies cancelling each other out, annihilating each other, until we finally get to a point where you get stable matter being produced, which then condenses into stars and galaxies and stars and planets, and then eventually, slowly but surely, everything is pulled back in again by the gravity of it all, pulling it back into what we would perceive in our metaphysical understanding as the beginning of the next octave. Now, Ra talks very closely about how the metaphysical physics and the way that the metaphysics, as it were, works is closely paralleled in the real world. That one mirrors the other. That they kind of work in a reciprocal action, as it were. So, really, when you've got to look at one of the main things that we need to understand here at this basic level is the fact that everything is mind. Before we get too far into what physics is, all is mind is the Hermetic axiom that's been around for thousands of years, and it's the idea that, well, like Ra says in, like, I think it's the first or second channeling, it's something like, we are dreams dancing inside the ballroom of a dream. That's because everything is mind. There's nothing else. Mind is the infinite intelligence that works on mind, which is the infinite energy, to create what we are, to create what we perceive as matter and perceive as reality. So, some of the main things we need to understand here is this idea of mentalism, which is that the matter is manifested by consciousness, not the other way. Consciousness is not an emergent property. Matter is an emergent property of consciousness. Now, there's two ways that we can really visualize this that I think are very helpful in spiritual seeking. One of these things is pantheism, which is the idea that God is everything. That there's no difference, there's no separation, we are one in everything. And all that you see, all that there is all creator. And then the other side of that coin is panpsychism, which is down to the very, very tiniest part. Even the wavelengths, the ethers themselves are conscious. That every single part of the universe is consciousness manifesting the next layer and the next layer and the next layer, as or densities, as they would then kind of layer themselves out. So this idea that matter is all a product of mind, and there's only one mind in the universe. So now, how does reality happen? So something that pretty much all the religions worldwide kind of they agree on is in the beginning there was the word. In Hindu religions, they say that Om is the primordial sound that created reality. That so in law of one terms, the logos, as we understand it, the creative, the active point of creative intelligence, how it makes reality is it uses vibration. It uses essentially sound as a structuring force to create form as we see it. So anyone that's ever heard of cymatics will be able to see this, where you put a sound wave into a flat plate, and then if you put sand on top of that flat plate, the sand will turn itself into specific patterns based on that resonance. Now, that is the same way that matter works, that all of emergent nature of the universe comes from that idea that vibration creates specific patterns, creates specific geometric resonance, which in specific medium holds its own structure. Now, the way Ra describes this is will. So will being the outward force, being the masculine creative element pushing outwards. But that essentially is chaos. It's entropy at its furthest reaches. Whereas love is the point that draws it all back together. It's the central point. It's the feminine. It's the point at which all creation wants to work its way back towards. So that gives us the idea of intention and like will, as in the want, the what's the word? The strength, the will to create, or you've got the way that in order to create, love has to be this central point that brings everything back, and that creates like a harmonic coherence where all of the waves that will produces have to create. You have to interact in a way that's either creative, constructive, or destructive. That's how waves interact. That's what will essentially is. It becomes the patterning, because only those symmetrical geometric patterns are able to like create form. So that's the kind of the way that you can perceive the will being an outward force that is purely vibrational into the patterning of the universe, the infinite energy. Then the vibration, the resonance, and the patterning that creates, but like by having that central principle, is what creates light, is what creates every step of matter above from light. So I've tried to put Ra quotes in throughout all of this, but I have actually got I've got a big list of Ra quotes to back all of it up. But I thought I could literally just sit here and give off Ra quotes the entire thing. So I thought I'd try to kind of get it down to the major ideas that we're talking about, and then if anyone wants to bring it back more directly to what Ra says in more specifics, then I can maybe do that a bit later. But anyway. I hope that you guys can all keep track of what I'm talking about in the ideas of how Ra describes it, because as you're going to see, the idea is that these patterns, the vibrations that the Logos uses to pattern, they are scale invariant. They are the same at the biggest scales right down to the smallest scales, and these are really the patterns that, at least our galactic Logos uses to create everything we understand. So the way that these things work, so we've all heard of sacred geometry, but why is it sacred? Realistically, all sacred geometry denotes is how circles and spheres interact in a sphere or a circle. If you think about the flower of life pattern, have you guys ever seen the thing where if you get, I think it's 64 Smarties and you put them in a bowl, and then you shake the bowl softly, you will always create the flower of life pattern. Always, every single time, because that is the most the most exact way that you can fit circles inside a circle. So all of physics that we know of, every single part of the universe works in this idea that you've got circles interacting with other circles. So sacred geometry then becomes the patterning of how the whole universe works, because all atoms that we know of are spheres, all particles we know of are spheres. So the geometry that is denoted by circles interacting in a circle becomes the patterning that all physics works on. So this is denoted mostly by the flower of life, which is seen in all places around the world, through to some of the oldest architecture seen on the planet, all the way through to far more complex vibrational models. Like at the minute, what we actually use at the thing to understand how particles work in a vibrational state, which is something that Ra talks about, the idea that vibration is intrinsic to the universe. Well, this is actually kind of backed up now by fluctuations in the quantum vacuum, which we'll get into later, which is this where we can see down to the point of where matter is actually being created now, or where it comes from in an abstract form. But let me just scroll on to the next screen, because this shows you the E8 lattice, if I can get that to play. And that's frustrating. Okay, so we're going to have to video then. So what we're looking at here is the E8 lattice. Now, this is a if I remember rightly. It's an 8th-dimensional hologram onto a 2-dimensional surface, if I remember rightly. But basically, the important thing to take away from this is each dot is like a little node of energy, and the vibration of going through it gives you symmetry that holds all the other parts in place. So as the vibration, as the simulation continues, you'll see patterns of shapes of nodes of vibration that will create form. And depending on the specific form that is created at each part of the lattice and each specific vibrational aspect is, in theory, what gives us matter. So that harmonic there would be a quark, whereas this one would be a photon or whatever else. So it all works on the idea that the interacting points of matter, or what I would call ether, interact in such a way that matter is the outcome. From a specific angle or a specific vector of force, you get a stable structure. Now, this idea that vibration is the patterning idea that brings it all together is at the minute the current theory of how electromagnetism works, about how gravity and mass work. The picture you've got there with the graphs there, that comes from a paper that came out, I think, about last year, I think, and that basically shows how the electromagnetic waves functions inside what's called I can't remember the guy's name. It's like the waltz geometry or something like that. But basically, they create specific points, peaks and troughs, that then give you specific forces on a very specific set of vectors, a very specific kind of structure that then becomes self-structuring, essentially. It holds its own form via the way the waves interact, that interference or a destructive or additional interference of the waves lengths. Anyway, those are the things that essentially, this vibration at this level is what creates matter as we know it. But it's not just how matter works. It's the same vibrational physics, the same patterning works at all scales. So when we're looking at this as how this vibration creates like standing waves that then interact in specific ways that give you matter, that give you light. Right? So this is the same thing that Ra talks about. Will being waves, being the interaction of creative intelligence, and love being that central point, that everything wanting to make its way back to Creator. Now, this same patterning is holographic, as Ra said. Ra said we live in a holographic universe where everything out there is reflected in here, and everything in here is reflected out there. Yeah. Now, this is one way of seeing it. The way that these particles put themselves together is the same way that galaxies form. It's the same physics that governs black holes. There's no difference between them. We used to think there was. We used to think that black hole was a big hole in space. That's completely wrong. The current understanding of black holes is completely different. Black holes do not suck in stuff. They do, because they do have a huge amount of gravity, but they don't pull it in and then it gets sucked into some other dimension. No, from what we understand it at the minute, they more spin matter around and then reorganize it into Hawking's radiation from the top and bottom, which follows these exact same holographically encoded patterns up to then create whole galaxies. So this at every step creates what's called torus fields. Now, I did want to find a video that I haven't been able to find it, that tracks one single kind of energetic particle, as it were, around a torus field, because it works very differently to what we think. When we look at a torus field, we see the kind of the traditional coming out from a magnet and coming out at the top and round and joining with the bottom. But that's not really how it works. Essentially, you have a toroidal field essentially pushes things out, and then they reach that center line, what's called the accretion disk, and then they stop. Right, and you've got a movement in both directions, from the south and the north node. They both pull round towards that central point. Now, at that central point, they then expand out, pushing on each other's energy, until you get to the point where they will essentially get past that central point with no force, and then the lines link up, and you get the standard magnetic field that we understand. Right, but understanding that difference, that there's that flat plane in the middle of a magnet, is quite an important one, because Ra talks about it later on. I'm going to try and find that video because it's quite informative. But the main thing that we really need to understand about toroids is that they are completely scale invariant from a galaxy. When you look at how a galaxy actually works, you have a black hole in the center, projection of Hawking's radiation, top and bottom. You then have 3 layers of a magnetosphere that goes around it, which gives you an exact torus field. It's a perfect kind of exact same shape. This same shape is detectable from you. It's what we call an aura. The planet has exactly the same magnetospheres protecting us from the sun. The sun has those exactly the same magnetosphere as it flies through space. We are all built inside these coherent toroidal lattices that are stacked on top of one another all the way up and down. And the more that we understand that, the more that we'll be able to kind of see this fractal understanding of the universe, that when a pattern works, that pattern works all the way up and all the way down. And that's how you get sacred geometry. That's how you get the Fibonacci sequencing and everything. That's how you get Metatron's cube being essentially the vector equilibrium of all the forces. All of these things work because of the fact that those same systems work at the galactic down to the atomic. So one guy that has spoke heavily about kind of light being the basis of all matter is a guy called Walter Russell. Now, he wasn't actually a physicist. From what I understand, he was I don't know, I think he was I'm not sure, but he went into a coma or something, and he woke up and he just wrote some of the most amazing physics ever written. So he basically describes how everything that we understand as chemistry, as physics, just comes down to a cyclical rhythmic balance. Like he describes it as a pendulum. That's what we see in this top picture up here, where you've got the mind of the one. See, he knows what it was about, right? And then down this bottom, you've got these states of the pendulum, +4, -4, swinging through zero in the center. That would be the +4, -4 valency of any atom. So that literally just describes how he described an atom and its electron shells as how far that pendulum swung one way or the other in the energetic sense. So he saw that all matter being a rhythmical pulse of light. And he saw that every, what we perceive as protons, neutrons, electrons, he saw all of those as different vibrational manifestations of light. So once again, that's exactly what Ra talks about, right? Will and love being those 2 primary forces, being that outward chaotic energetic force going from the Big Bang out. Love being gravity, being the strong nuclear force, being the things that pull everything back together into those sacred geometric patterns. And then those geometric patterns make light. That's what Ra talks about as the fundamental building block that makes the whole universe. Well, he talks about it in the same way Walter Russell does, that an atom is a nexus of a vibrational energy. And the second picture at the side there that you can see below, ones that look like loads of squiggly lines, you may recognize that from what was that actor that was in Iron Man? Terrence Howard. Yes, he did a speech recently where he described matter working according to a spiral pattern of essentially a toroidal growth of vibrational energy, which gives us each specific type of atomic radius and atomic structure. Well, that was, very, very old work that came from what Russell's worked. And you can see it there, where he basically just talks about how each type of atom that we know of is just a different vibrational patterning of light. Now, this might seem like an old term, but when you think about these things just being a toroidal expression that we've just spoke about, everything works in toruses, and that when you look at actually some of the most modern understanding about particle physics, actually kind of agrees with this same idea that the sacred geometric patterning of essentially the 0 point field of the fabric of reality itself into specific patterns is what causes both mass and gravity, as Nassim Haramein's point as published recently. I'd highly recommend going and looking into his work. I think he is really going to change the world with the stuff he's working on, and everything he talks about is supported in what Rata says. It's all in there somewhere. So he talks about how polarity is the kind of the force that organizes toroidal fields. So the idea that there's a positive and negative pole. Well, he talks about what are called quantum oscillators. These things vibrate at a very specific speed of light rate, but you could talk about them in the same way that people always used to talk about ether. This baseline particles that are far, far smaller than an atom, far, far smaller than a quark, that essentially organize themselves into what we understand as matter. So he talks about these quantum oscillators being the things that are inside the 0 point field, which is how we are starting to learn that we can pull energy out from. But because of this toroidal shape that the polarity part forms, that is the reason why toroids are the structures that pervade everything we see, because of the fact that everything has polarity, like another hermetic rule, and something that Ra talks about as being fundamental to how reality works as we know it. So this once again leads into this idea of a hologram, of a fractal, where every single step from the biggest to the smallest is the same. That they are not only are they the same, but they all connected. They're all interlinked. So in the idea of the actual universe as we know it, if we follow this logic, then it is a quantum. A huge torus field as well. It's not just atoms. Everything is. Now, before we get into the sides of the galaxy and the universe, maybe let's talk about kind of this small layered this baseline fabric again, because when asked about what was in the vacuum, Ra said there is no vacuum. Everything is a plenum. Now, the word plenum basically means unbelievably full at every single layer. There's no such thing as empty anything. So what's it full of? So in ancient Hinduism and lots of other kind of ancient religions, they had the idea of ethers. Now, these are fundamental particles, like little kind of marbles or whatever, like balls, toruses, who knows, that are a plenum, that make all of reality unbelievably full. Up until about 100 years ago, 1920, I think, when they did the experiments, all of physics was based on the idea that there was ether. Then someone did some really quite dodgy math and said, nope, ether, in order for ether to work, it needs to weigh as much as tin, And that's it. Science was not allowed to mention ether ever again, even though it has been the standard model of how physics has worked for thousands of years. But it's fine. We deal with it. They made string theory to make up for it. And what happened there? Yes, just in case any of you guys know, string theory is an absolute load of nonsense. None of it works like that. So throw all of those textbooks in the bin. Nonsense. Ether. Let's get back to what it really should be. This plenum. This unbelievably rich, thick field of what used to be described as conscious living matter. Yeah, that layer of reality is the consciousness, the consciousness layer, the infinite intelligence. Yeah, and the ethers were the infinite energy that was used to create matter. Not only that, but in a lot of Hindu beliefs, one of the type of ethers, which may I just say, they had, I think, 6, I believe, all in all, but 4 of them were the elements. They were air, earth, fire, water. Those ethers, those 4 elements, are exactly what Ra says is doing the conscious processing in the first density. Is the thing that is the will and the love working on one another. It's those elemental forces coming together to make matter. Well, that's what the ethers were. Yeah, and I think they had one for spirit, and they also had one for the Akash. So the Akashic field, as we call, or the Akashic record, as it's been spoken about. This is the idea that part of the conscious ethers is fixed, and as time progresses and as we do things, it's set, as in it's a crystal from that point on. So what happens in the past is set as a crystal in that Akashic record, in that Akashic field. All of the movements of those other ethers to create the plenum is stored in that Akashic record, a kind of cosmic memory that actually holds all of the states of all of the matter at any time point. So, then we've got this idea that what we understand now to be, the plenum has been rewritten over and over again as all these different things. But realistically, what we've got at the minute is the quantum vacuum, is the idea that a certain level, there's no such thing as matter, but there's still energy moving. There's still, in that quantum vacuum, there is still energy. There is still coherent structures at work, even though there isn't electromagnetic vibration, there isn't any of the other things that we think about as a manifested reality. So, all of these things, in my opinion, are taking us one little step, one bit at a time, back towards this idea of the ethers being the actual fundamental working unit of the 0 point field. So the 0 point field has been spoken about for a very long time. It's something that I think Max Planck decided needed to be there. And it's just been kind of written out of most equations because as a background radiation, when arguably it's the most important bit of the equations. They just haven't really focused on it until very recently. So why is that? Oh, wait a sec, because it might give us free power. Oh yeah, that might be it, but it doesn't matter. That's the reasons are what they are. We're now starting to really understand this stuff, and the structure and the forces, and like I said, the coherence around this idea of oneness is supporting by the actual science that is happening. So how does matter happen? So you start off with this 0 point field, yes, which is basically, arguably it's these quantum oscillators, but arguably it's also the ethers, and they are at any point they are fluctuating and vibrating with the bubbles of basal level energy that are just perforating through all of it. But they don't generally have enough energy, or the harmonics and the cohesion to form matter. So by using this and actually understanding this kind of ground state of reality, we're really starting to understand how things are made. So this picture at the side here with the spheres, that is the mathematical model that Nassim Harim has been using to show how essentially how matter can be created from this scale up toroidal structure. So in the middle you've got the 0 point field, and that is essentially just like we're talking about this plenum of quantum possibility, potential. Now, in order for it to go up to the next orange layer, you need to have very specific mathematical correlations. There needs to be very specific patterning put onto it, very specific interplay between love and will, until finally you actually get the blue layer, which is the kind of the manifest vibration becoming a unit of reality, as it were. So, as I mentioned earlier, who's to say that those toroidal structures down at the micro level aren't exactly repeated at the macro level, and that the entire universe doesn't work as one giant hologram of a toroid? Now, this picture here, you might recognize it from how can I say his name? Ishtan. Anyway, Josh put his books up. They're quite good books. But this one actually came from the CIA Gateway program. This is the picture that they use to show the US CIA military bods how the universe was set up. So you've got the black hole, white hole in the center, where the white hole pushes outwards into one side of the toroid. Now that's the point where essentially you talk about space-time being created from that pole outwards, and you've got space-time going in one direction and time-space going the other. You've got the entire thing being reflected at every layer, giving you a complete universal hologram, and that's why everything works as toroids, all the way up, all the way down, and this is the same way that like I said, that when you actually look at what hologram is, because this is all quite interesting. If you get what a hologram was initially when it was first discovered, was they got a piece of glass and they projected an image onto that piece of glass. Then they shattered the piece of glass. Now, because of the way that light refracts inside the glass, you can retrieve the entire image that was put onto the entire piece of glass from any piece of the glass by basically re-correlating where the refraction pattern comes from. That same idea works with the whole universe. So every single part of the universe is in a direct connection to every other part of the universe. Now, this is something I like to talk about when you talk about quantum entanglement. Now, the idea that when the Big Bang did happen, when the I Am tried to understand itself and everything exploded outwards, those waves that spread around doing their own thing, will, intent, they were all still linked. They were all still quantum entangled, you could say, by being the mind of the one creator. So every single thing, everything that makes you, every single atom inside you is linked to every single other atom in the universe. There's no separation. The idea that we are separate from each other, from the world, from any other part of matter, is all an illusion. They're all just distortion. And this is how that distortion works. You come out, that white hole is what creates the manifest universe that we know. Yeah, now as space-time goes around there, like Josh put up a picture a while ago, where going around the outside edge of that, you have the densities. So moving from one end, you've got first density, second density, third, all the way back through to you getting absorbed into the black hole at the other end, that nucleation point, that point where the octave changes up again. all the way around that whole journey is your 1 to 7 octaves. And if you were going to start talking about the idea that God created man in his image, we are a torus field. Every single thing in the universe is a torus field. So if that's a picture of God, then he has created every single thing is in his image. And that just blows my mind. Anyway, gotta love fractals, right? So let's get into the last of the kind of the dimensional aspects that I think we really need to get here, because we just realized that space doesn't actually matter. Space isn't really a real thing. We're all still touching. The Big Bang is still happening, arguably. This is just a projection. So, what about what's time, space, right? So, Ra talks about how you've got time, space, and space time, and this is also something that's heavily linked into the Dewey B. Lawson version of physics, which is something I'd highly recommend looking into. The guy was another visionary, and his work really ties in well with what Ra talks about. So, he talks about how physics, it works in like a reciprocal action. So, space is in itself, like matter doesn't really exist, and space as we understand it is more motion, it's more vibration moving through a medium, and that's how he perceives it, that the vibratory aspect that creates the matter that we perceive, it is one aspect of reality, and that creates one-dimensional understanding. But also, time is the direct correlation, the reciprocal action against that motion through space. So they're intrinsically linked, the two aspects, but they're separate. You have a space-time dimension where which is how we perceive it, where we are incarnate into space-time. We perceive and understand everything being a sequential, individualized experience that we move through in a linear manner from one to the next. But also, Ra talks about a time-space dimension, which is heavily linked with this reciprocal action idea, where it comes down to something that we're going to talk about in later parts. In meditation, there's actually a whole point that you can get to where you can actually make your mind go on seemingly forever. That there's no idea of space or time to consciousness. So this idea of a non-local, eternal and external patterning to what you are, being space, and then the internal and the disconnected part of you being in time space, and them being reciprocal of one another, but not necessarily defined by one another. So time space, as it were, like Ra describes it, could be an infinite amount of potentials with a specific space point that you would then tune into, how Ra describes the idea that you can anyway, I digress. This idea that they're separate is actually well displayed in the Dewey B. Lawson understanding of physics, and I think that is quite a good way of perceiving this idea of us as a kind of quantum computer, something that collapses the waveform into experiential understanding. So realistically, we and us being consciousness in this form, we're the only thing that can understand this in both directions. That can understand a space-time and a time-space aspect. And that's where I think we're going to be heading in 4D, if you ask my opinion. So, speaking of time, once again, just like space, time is an illusion, right? That's what Ra says, that time isn't really what we think it is. And when you look at physics, physics agrees. Once again, time doesn't really matter. It's kind of all happening all at once, and it more comes down to what choices we pick, what setting we put into the ethers in the Akashic for what's in the past, and the quantum probability possibility matrix of the future in front of us. So these are not separate things. And like we've just said, time is a bit of an illusion. And the further you go up the ladder, the easier it is to see that time doesn't really exist the way we think it does. Hence why Ra can, or our higher self, can be off in the future and speaking to us in our mind. So what's called retrocausality, this idea that someone in the future could affect things in the past. So this comes down to this idea that there's a vibrational energy that comes with observation that collapses a specific outcome into being real. Now, if you're thinking about this moving forward in time from a point, yeah, then that's reaching out into the future with what your consciousness is going to do, and the advanced wave, as we call it here, is actually reaching back backwards in time to kind of grab hold of something from the past, essentially. So let's take the idea of a sun. This sun could be billions of light years away, and it's sending light towards Earth. Now, if you have a detector there, then you'll be detecting photons of light coming from that sun billions of light years away. But as we know, with the observer effect, if you're looking at it, it will have a different response to if you're not looking at it. That's because of the fact that you've got this wave coming from you that is reaching back to, in time, to that absorbing part of the sun 10 billion years ago. And then it is sending out, it's emitting that particle at that time, billions of years ago, before you even existed to look at the sensor. So this transactional understanding of what reality is completely pulls apart what time is, essentially. But it only really works in one direction. So this is why you get retrocausality, why something in the future can send something back to us, but really we send things to the future by action. But it's the acts of those two things from every single part of the past interacting with the very present moment. That's why there is only ever that present moment, by the way. It's that interaction of all of time interacting with that moment that you're in that creates this collapse of potential energies into actuality of reality as we see it. And that's why we are co-creators in the way that Ra describes. Without our understanding and our observation and that's why they say we can't do anything wrong, because all we really need to do is be here to witness creation, to show it love, to help it progress in its harmonics, in its as harmonious way as possible. And that's it. We are doing what we're here to do. So here's my favorite meme ever, just to say. I could look at that all day. It's hilarious. But this is the observer effect. And this is what I was talking about, how our observation of reality is what defines reality. So if you say, but this is another thing. Remember panpsychism, something I was talking about before, that every single thing in the universe has its own consciousness, has its own observation. Ra says that the first density is the density of awareness. That means that every atom is aware. It is helping a co-creative force in the co-structuring of every other atom. We are the same for the universe that we can see. Now, like when you start looking at this in a wider sense, there's some really crazy theories. Like if we take that time doesn't exist and matter doesn't really exist, then this crazy theory called the single electron loop concept, where there's only one electron and there doesn't need to be any others, because time doesn't exist to an electron. It's moving at the speed of light, and mass doesn't exist to an electron. Distance doesn't exist to an electron. There's more than enough time and space for it to be every electron in every atom everywhere in the universe all at once. Guys, in physics weird. But the idea that atoms themselves are co-creators, and that just them being in a chemical bond are utilizing thousands of quanta of information in order to create what they are. So we and every single toroidal layer and scale are all in this act of observing and creating the actual universe around us by collapsing that waveform into the two little lines rather than loads of wavy lines. So this brings us to this idea that consciousness is universal, that everything is alive, that panpsychism and pantheism work at all levels in these structured toroidal loops going up and down. So this picture here, which I have to say I stole from one of your memes, Daniel. It's a really lovely image. You can look at, as I said earlier, a galaxy as it is has at its core a black hole. Now, our understanding of black holes has changed a lot recently. We now know that what they do is they pull everything in. Yes, they put it in gravitationally, but as it gets there at the event horizon, instead of being pulled down into a big gravitational singularity forever, instead we now understand that it more hits a kind of the edge of a spinning mass that's spinning so fast it turns all of light into energy, and that energy is then pulled in, and it's kind of reformatted and repatterned to come out as Hawking's radiation out of the top of essentially a torus. That, like I said, our galaxy has got 3 layers of magnetosphere around it, which you could say gives it chakras, which gives it 3 going up and 3 going down, which then layer, like I said, pull in that energy around to the midpoint, to that accretion disk, which it then deposits all of that Hawking's radiation as repurposed and reformed matter, which is what the Milky Way is. It goes on that accretion disk because that is essentially the midpoint in the magnetic bar. Shoots out the top and the bottom, and it comes around and it settles in that central point, because that's the heart chakra. That is the place where essentially we as organisms, and every stage of organism, that is the 0 point energy position in any field. That is the point that the energy is pulled from and stabilized with. So that idea that everything being pulled into a cyclic universal patterning that we saw at every stage throughout the whole thing, that black hole is essentially that central point in the toroidal shape. So it might not look like it to us, but at the very center of our galaxy, and arguably the very center of the universe, there is going to be giant black holes that we now know are the heart chakras. So, just finally, I've got a little kind of hit list here of things to kind of keep in mind. So, the Ra triad, our will, love, light, right? That is essentially the source applying patterning onto the field, which then gives us manifestation. Right now, then the geometry is the patterning that we use to create the actual particles. Then that toroidal flow is what keeps us stabilized. the quantum connection, the space-time, time-space, and the quantum entanglement is the things that link all of these different concepts together, and it does it via the plenum and that akashic recording system, which is this 0 point energy field, which, like we said, the geometric patterning that creates reality comes from. Yes, and then we're gonna essentially go all the way through every single thing, trying to work its way back in ever more complex and more beautiful structuring until we get to this idea of the big crunch, which, can I just say, a paper came out very recently showing that the big crunch is by far the most likely outcome for the universe as we know it. So that's essentially it. Time, space, complete kind of weirdnesses. Do they exist? Don't they? And consciousness being this major key part in all of it. So I hope that's been okay. I've got time for questions.
Thank you very much, Ed. It was really impressive, your presentation. And yeah,
Thank you.
now you speaking was very perfect, was good. If anyone have some questions to add or on the round or want to do some comments, then please raise your hands, and then we can. Yeah, we have Daniela Matt.
Yeah, hey, I just wondered about white holes. Are white holes synonymous with suns, or is it a different thing?
Okay, so white hole, essentially, if you want to look at it, the very, very most basic way of viewing it would just be the north pole part of any of those toroidal systems. So the point that where you're getting the energy condensing up, it would be our crown chakra, for example. Yeah, that would be the kind of that point by which comes into manifestation. And yes, the same thing applies up and down. The white hole would be the north, and black hole would be the south. The gravitational return, as it were, after the outward expression.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wanted to ask something? Make a comment?
Yeah, thank you, Ed. That was so fantastic and great. It's crazy how well you taught that and how well I'm able to receive and understand what you shared. So thank you. But to expand on the white hole, I guess I wanted to ask to add, is there like a white hole in terms of like in the cosmos, in the universe? There's a black hole out there. So do white holes exist in that kind of way?
Okay, so they're still kind of hypothesized because we can't strictly see them, but if you guys really want to kind of look into kind of where the metaphysical idea of a white hole is really powerful, look into a book called The Prism of Illyria. It talks about how a white hole is kind of like a prism the creator's light is kind of beamed into, and it kind of separates it out into the mass, kind of the many faceted parts of reality. But for example, the idea of a humanoid shape, as it were, the morphology of what us being like this, all comes from that original creative outpouring somewhere in space. I think that's where the 9 come from as well. So yes. That I'd highly look into that book if you want to look into this idea of how a white hole can create reality.
I would ask Ed to give us a short forecast for the next module.
Okay, so the next one, I believe, is all about consciousness, and it's all about the quantum consciousness principle. So we've just kind of learned that that everything is made of consciousness. That the universe itself is just the consciousness patterning reality into matter. Yeah, well, this is talking about how we understand consciousness, how the interaction between this matter here and the The other components of what we are is what gives us consciousness, and it's fundamental, and our body is just here to facilitate it, not the other way around.
Thanks to everyone to being here, and see you next time.